Nothing Else Mattress show. I'm going to tell you what. I'm super excited about this one.
Me too.
We got MJ here from Water Tower Grill, that's a hometown bar and grill here in Adairsville, Georgia. This is an after hours episode. MJ is going to dive into all kinds of things, but bourbon's going to have a large part of the conversation.
As it should.
Yes. Nothing Else Mattress after hours show starts now.
Cheers.
MJ, thank you very much for being a part of the show.
Thank you for having me.
We've been trying for weeks to get together. MJ's a busy guy. It took a while to get on the calendar.
Got a few irons in the fire.
A few. One of which has been this beautiful, I wish you guys could tour the restaurant that we're sitting in right now. This is going to be the cigar room?
Yes.
Am I right?
This will be our bourbon and cigar room. We'll do tastings, bourbon tastings, and then you can rent it out privately and enjoy a cigar. We won't be smoking inside, but we do have an area that we are renovating outside. There's a little window you can't see, but there's a really nice magnolia, and it provides a lot of shade. So we'll be able to, humidor will be in here, and you'll be able to purchase a cigar and take it outside with your bourbon and enjoy it.
Nice. Adairsville has needed something like this. So Joe and I live in this tiny little town, Adairsville, North Georgia. We've talked about it if you guys have met us before. You would not think a restaurant of this caliber would be in little old Adairsville.
Thank you.
But we are so blessed to have MJ and his wife Kandace running the Water Tower Grill. So before we get into the bourbon conversation, which I know is what everybody's so excited to hear, I really love, because of course the meat of the show is always about origin stories and how you ended up where you are now. So give us your story. How did you end up being, you and Kandace owning Water Tower Grill, the name? Just tell us the story.
Man, it's been so long ago. So we, about 8 years ago.
It can't have been that long. You're like 12.
Right? I wish I was. Thank you for the flowers. I appreciate it. If you look right there. About 8 years ago, we decided to go all in and try a restaurant. And we had some partners and some different visions and some different concepts, but ultimately what we ended up with was the Water Tower Grill as a new concept. We did some things before, but our old location was located right underneath the local water tower. And so it actually wasn't us. It was another gentleman. We were all sitting there. We're thinking, what are we going to name this new restaurant? And he pointed and he said, how about the Water Tower Grill? And it was just rang a bell. It was just perfect.
I did not know that story.
So that's where the water tower came from. Thank you, Charles. And from there, we continued to put back into it and make it grow and continually try to polish and learn new concepts. We went to tons of test kitchens. We went to other kitchens and experimented with other chefs and learned from them, and they learned from us. And yeah, over the course of the 8 years, we just slowly put more bricks in the wall and built it up to what it is today.
So part of why you're loved so much locally is that you make it fun. The food is really good, but I mean, I can say from, not just our experience, but various friends that have visited and we come in and everyone that comes in, you make a point to go out into the dining room or the bar or whatever, and you make people feel so genuinely welcomed.
Well, thank you.
It's you create a feeling.
So it's just, I have a passion for what we do. I love it. I love that people support us. And if someone's going to take the time to come in and support our dream, I mean, it just makes me light up. And so I think it's just easy to do,
Well, it shows for sure because it's genuine. I mean, it's obvious that you genuinely appreciate everybody that comes in. So I'm going to say we're not allowed to actually talk about this year Best of Georgia at all. But I will say that in previous years, you have won Best of Georgia. It's very proudly displayed, the plaques and the awards. And it could be that MJ will have a great announcement coming out soon. We can't say it yet, but it could be.
Could be.
Am I allowed to talk about the fact that in previous years you have won?
Yeah. Hopefully we've won the past 3 years in a row, the best
Nice.
American cuisine in Georgia. And so hopefully we'll go number 4 this year.
Nice. Yeah, in little old Adairsville, Georgia. How about that? So Kandace, and we're going to talk a little bit about her because I know she's a little not really camera shy, but for the podcast, she's off doing other things here, and we're here at the close of business. We've just had a great meal, but you guys really are an example of owning a business together. How do y'all manage like the balance and at work, and then you've got a family at home, you got 2 boys?
It can be a lot. I will say it. I don't want to say it just works, but we know we get in the car and we say, hey, I need to discuss a few things, and you need to discuss a few things. But once we get home, we know that we're home, and that doesn't mean we don't discuss work at home. But she's just wonderful. It's funny you mentioned she was doing something else. She's the beautiful one. She should be sitting here, but
tried to get her to. Julie is beautiful.
We just it's just she's the yin to my yang. I'm not trying to simplify it, but it just works. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better life and business partner. I really couldn't.
That's so awesome, so awesome. Well, watching you guys over the last several years work together. So I got to tell how we officially met MJ. It wasn't like first time we'd ever met because we'd eaten at the restaurant before. But, you see people out of context of where you normally see them. And this was several years ago. So you had Water Tower Grill, but we weren't on a first name basis the way we are now. And
I remember this encounter.
MJ and his wife came into the mattress store, and Joe was working. And so conversation goes around, and so they bought a mattress, and in getting the address for delivery, Joe hears Adairsville, which is, of course, where we live. And Joe's like, hey, do you know there were 3 really good places to eat in Adairsville? And MJ's like, oh, really? Do tell. So Joe says, yeah, Rome, Cartersville, and Calhoun.
The surrounding cities.
The sort of surrounding cities. So MJ was like, you should really try Water Tower Grill. And Joe's like, oh, we love Water Tower Grill. That is... the whole city thing is a joke, but no, Water Tower Grill is great. And MJ's like, okay, yeah, all right, you're forgiven
cool.
now.
We're good. That's my spot.
It goes down, but then we've been friends ever after.
Then I left, and Joe was like, what's Water Tower Grill?
Well, we didn't know it was MJ's place at the time. He was just like, oh, you should try it. But no, we're absolutely regulars here every week. Sit at the bar. Holly's a great bartender.
Thank you for that.
And you have made one of the coolest events around bourbon tastings.
Thank you.
And how awesome that Adairsville has a bourbon tasting. So I'm not a big bourbon lover. I've got my Cosmo here. I'm a vodka drinker, but Joe likes bourbon. MJ is a bourbon aficionado. So I would just want to, I know nothing about bourbon. So talk to me like I'm a first grader. Tell me why there are, first of all, what is bourbon? To define it for me, because I don't understand why. Bourbon, whiskey, I don't understand.
This is our entire selection right here. This is all we got.
So. Whatever. We're going to overlay some pictures of the actual bar, which is a small percentage of MJ's collection.
So with bourbon, there are several perimeters. Well, let's make it easy. Let's start with the alphabet. Let's start with A, B, C. So A would be America. It has to be made in the 48 continental states of America. Okay. When we originally started in the bourbon world, it had to be made in Bourbon County, Kentucky. So anything outside of Bourbon County, Kentucky, even in America, was considered whiskey.
Okay.
So a few years ago, they extended the perimeters to be the 48 continental states. And so it has to be made in America. And so B is for barrel. And there's a few perimeters around the barrel. Has to be white oak. It has to be a virgin barrel, meaning nothing has been stored in it before. And it has to be charred on the inside. Now, there's a light char, there's heavy char, and there's everything in between. There's actually levels, and different distilleries have different levels of char. Some go from 1 to 5. Some go from 1 to 20. So some have a very wide variety of chars.
Okay.
The more char, the more color that you get, and we'll get into that in a little bit later. And the C that we have is corn, and it means that at least 51% of what the whiskey is distilled with has to be corn. So normally you only hear about wheat, rye, or straight barley, bourbon, and so that's your 3 choices in the whiskey and bourbon world. So to go within those perimeters, 51%, at least 51% of the mash bill or what the recipe is has to be corn. If it's less than 51%, even if it's made in America, and it's in that white oak virgin charred barrel, it is still, and it is whiskey. It is not bourbon.
Okay.
So America barrel corn, if you miss any of those, and it actually goes distillate, entry proof, fill proof, genuality, so on and so forth. But ABC is all you need to know.
Okay.
Let's say Crown Royal, for instance, it's a Canadian whiskey.
Okay.
The only reason it is a Canadian whiskey, it is made in a virgin white oak charred barrel. It is 51% corn, but it's made in Canada, so it's not in America.
So it's not an A.
It's a Canadian
It's got the B
whiskey.
and C.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And same for Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels is made in America. It's all the perimeters it hits, the A, B, and the C. But the G that I was talking about, the genuality, nothing can be done to the bourbon or to the distillate before it hits the bottle. So if you add any flavoring to it, it is now whiskey. It's not bourbon.
Okay.
So Jack Daniels is a bourbon, but they run it through a 15-foot tall, and that's way less than 15 foot. I don't know why I didn't want to do it. But when they're distilling it and they filter it through a 15-foot tall charcoal stack, and that makes it not bourbon. So now they call it Tennessee whiskey. Only difference.
These fine little details that make all the difference in the world.
Same with Jameson.
So, okay.
It's Irish whiskey.
So Irish.
It's
okay.
It's 51% corn. It's aged in a white oak virgin charred barrel, but Ireland. So it's not bourbon. It's a whiskey. Right. It's an Irish whiskey.
So why is it just me? Because Joe has kind of had this interest in bourbon in the last few years, and so I'm kind of just been exposed to it and coming to the bourbon tastings. But is it kind of increased in popularity in the last few years, and is there a reason why?
100%. So there are more. Put this in perspective. There are more barrels in the state of Kentucky being aged than there are citizens of the state of Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
I believe there's 3 barrels for each person. So give it,
10, 12 years?
Yeah, right.
People will buy it for $2 a bottle.
Yeah. And Buffalo Trace, to anticipate this surge in demand, has created, they got a grant, and I want to say it was around $100 million from the state of Kentucky because they're a huge tourist attraction. So they're adding even more barrels, and they're doing that to make your bourbons even more available. But that's a slippery slope because they like to have bourbons that aren't readily available.
I was going to say, because the exclusivity is part of the intrigue, right?
Yes, and it's tough because they want to sell enough of it to make a profit. But if you sell too much of it, it becomes common.
Yeah.
And it's not a collector's item. And there's so many different ways to explain it. I joke that the kids that collected Pokemon cards when I was young, everybody played Pokemon and they had a whole book.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, those kids grew up and they started collecting bottles of bourbon.
Did you do Pokemon Go? That wasn't a thing probably.
I didn't Go, but I had the cards. I had some of the cards.
Okay. Sorry, back to bourbon. I just
no, you're good. You're good.
Pokemon.
But I was just trying to think if I had ever traded a Pokemon card for some bourbon, but I haven't. So there's something I haven't done.
So how do they predict, or can they, what's going to sell or be popular, 10, 12 years from now? We've got these aged bourbons. Like, how do they know how much to make?
So that's another thing. The demand creates the exclusivity. So they're not really worried about how much they make on certain bourbons. Now, your Buffalo Trace, your Eagle Rare, your Everyday, your Weller Special Reserve, the green bottle right here, that's going to be mass produced, well put out. They're going to have tons of that. But then if you go to this guy right here on the other end of the Weller spectrum is so rare, they only release it once a year. And I believe
get the bottle down and let's put it in front of the camera because
that all the other bottles have a similar shape, right? But this guy, he's special. So this is William LaRue Weller. And once you drink enough of it, you get to see his picture. There's his nose up. But this is the man responsible for creating the Weller brand. And what this is in comparison to the others, it's uncut, it's unfiltered. They do absolutely nothing to this before they bottle it. So with, all of these bourbons, they're starting off with this, but then they are diluting it with a limestone water, and all bourbon is diluted with limestone water. We'll get into that in a second, but they're diluting this down to different strengths or proofs in order to release different flavors and get different flavor profiles. So this is uncut, unfiltered. What we would call that is full flavored. You're going to get every bit of the barrel's char, every bit of the distillates shining in there. And you can look at these two, and you may not really be able to see it from the camera, but looking at them, this one is so much darker than this one.
It is, yeah, way darker.
It's because this
like
has
maple
been
syrup.
diluted.
Yeah.
I love this so much that I named my dog after it. His name is LaRue.
Wow. So a quick question, because I see it says bourbon whiskey. So based on your explanation, am I correct in saying all bourbons are whiskeys, but all whiskeys are not
Correct,
bourbons?
100%.
So it's correct then to call that a bourbon whiskey.
Yes, all bourbon is whiskey, 100%.
I'm getting smart.
And all whiskeys are not bourbon, because Jameson is Irish whiskey, Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey, and then Crown Royal Canadian whiskey.
Okay, so
Scotch is whiskey too. So you have
really?
Yes, Scotch is a whiskey. It's just not a bourbon, but Scotch, Scotch it falls outside those perimeters because the mash bill is not 51% corn. Sometimes they use something called peat, which is, to me, if I were to describe peat as a flavor, it would be burnt leaves.
Okay.
Scotch.
Tell us you don't love Scotch without saying that you're not a big.
I like Scotch, certain Scotches, but I absolutely love bourbon. But a lot of times when I have Scotch, it reminds me of being in the yard with my dad when he was burning leaves and the wind changed, and it just. Don't get me wrong, Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich, 15. There's Scotches I'll drink and I'll enjoy, but if I'm really going to enjoy it, it's going to be bourbon.
Gotcha. So what are you drinking tonight?
So this is a Jefferson's Ocean. This might be a good segue into explaining how bourbon is aged. So most bourbon, excluding this guy, the Ocean, but 99% of your bourbons are stored in something called a rick house. A rick house is the racks that they store the bourbon in vertically are called ricks. And so they put their barrels in, and you may have, 20 different stories or levels of bourbon, but they're all in a single rick going up and down. So you might have A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, or they may barrel them A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, B1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
The significance of that, though, none of the rick houses are climate controlled. And the reason that they do that is they want it to get really hot in there in the summer and really cold during the winter.
Okay.
The reason they want to do that is it creates movement in the barrel. So to dumb it down a little bit, when your skin gets cold in the winter, it contracts and you get goosebumps. Okay. Yep. When your skin gets hot during the summer and you're sweating, your pores open and it expands. Okay. So
that's basically me year round. I'm just saying.
Right? Me too. So this beautiful amber color that you get, it actually starts off clear like moonshine. It's corn whiskey. It has absolutely no color to it whatsoever. And then they pour it in this virgin white oak charred barrel that was made in America's. That's where their distillate came from. It's 51% corn. They pour it in this barrel, they cap it, and they put it in the rick house. And that very first winter, the wood will contract. And when it contracts, it brings moisture. It brings the distillate into the wood. Yes. Okay. Actually, while I'm here, you grab behind these bottles.
Oh, yeah.
So that you can see.
Yeah, don't knock anything off. I'll be good. Okay.
So here
scary there for touch and go there for a minute.
This is called a barrel stave. So if you can imagine, this is the side of a barrel, and you would make these together to make the barrel. So they char the inside of the barrel, and then they put the clear distillate in it. Now, what happens is when the wood constricts, and this hasn't been used, this is charred, but this hasn't been used. The wood goes in, the distillate goes into the wood, and it stays there for that whole winter. Then that it's stored there and it's collecting flavor, creating flavor. When that next summer comes around and the wood expands, it pushes it back out. And what's happening is not only is it going into the wood, but it's passing through this char. So the more times it passes in and out of that char and into the wood and out,
which is the aged, many years.
The more aged it is, the darker the color and the more full the flavor. And so, a 2 or 3 year bourbon is going to look like a Scotch. Touching back on Scotch, the reason Scotch, have you ever noticed it's kind of pale? It doesn't have this super dark.
I have, totally.
The reason that it looks like that is because in Scotland, you don't really get a lot of climate change. Your winter isn't a lot cooler than your summer, whereas Kentucky, you get down to 10 and you get into 100 versus In Scotland, you're getting to 70 and to 50. So it doesn't create that much movement in the wood or through the char, so you don't get that beautiful color that you get like you do with bourbon.
So fascinating.
But to touch back on that, they don't climate control them. That explains to you how the distillate goes in and out. So just to elaborate on that a little more, a bourbon barrel sitting right next to another barrel, they're going to taste so different. And the further apart they are, or higher and lower they are, they're going to taste different. But you would think two barrels right next to each other in the rick house are going to be just alike, but it very much varies. And so the way that they handle that, for instance, you get a Jim Beam. Every time you open that Jim Beam bottle, you want that Jim Beam taste.
Tastes the same.
So they will take a rick house and they will blend it all together. Not necessarily all of it, but 20 barrels, 200 barrels.
Enough for consistency.
Yes, that way every time, from top to bottom, they blended it together. You got that one flavor. Well, there's something called a single barrel product, and that's where they just take one barrel and they bottle it until it's gone, and then they go into the next barrel. And a single barrel product, no two barrels will taste the same. So some people seek those out so that they can get different flavors.
Okay.
Something that I recently learned is that Eagle Rare is a brand that most people know. If you don't, you should definitely check it out. It's produced by Buffalo Trace. It's a 10-year age stated bourbon. It used to be a single barrel product, and it was actually made by a Seagram's own brand. Buffalo Trace, Sazerac, as a matter of fact, that owns Buffalo Trace, bought Eagle Rare and moved it over to Buffalo Trace, and they were bottling it as a single barrel 101 proof product. Well, as time went on, they started barreling all their single barrel products in the same warehouse that they are bottling Blanton's in. I'm sure you heard of Blanton's before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was from the
yes.
Yeah, you had the top bottle tops there.
Little bottle toppers off the top of each bottle. So they found that they didn't want to bottle it in there, and they moved it to another bottling warehouse. And so now it's called a select barrel product. It's also 90 proof rather than 101 proof. But the reason it's called a select barrel is because they put it, rather than a person bottling it, they put it on a line. And so that barrel may have a little bit left. And so you'll end up getting the end of one barrel and the beginning of another. And that's not truly single barrel.
Okay.
So that's a select barrel. And all that means is most of it's single barrel, but every now and again you get the end of one and the beginning of another. Over. That allows them to just automate the process and just feed a barrel.
So somebody like you then can go in, right? And you could pick a barrel? Isn't that a thing that you could do?
It is for Sazerac and for Buffalo Trace. If you're watching this, hey, Sazerac and Buffalo Trace, we would love to do a single barrel select with the Water Tower Grill with you guys. But anyway, sorry.
I'll see what I can do. Yeah. I'll make a couple calls for you.
We've done a Woodford Double Oak. We've done barrels of those. Those go over great. People tend to love those. But yes, you can go in certain barrel programs and select your own barrel. What mostly happens is that, say that we, after this podcast, Sazerac sees this and they're going to give us a barrel, they will allow us to go up and look at different places and pick an area. Smaller distilleries will let you pick barrels, but they'll let you pick an area and they'll pull a barrel from that area up to about 6 areas. Then they'll roll those 6 barrels out and you taste them. And whichever one you think is the best, you can purchase that entire barrel and they'll bottle it and customize
and you get to keep the barrel?
Yes. We have you can't see it, but there's a Woodford Reserve barrel that we have in
the corner.
That was our last Woodford Double Oak pick. Which we'll probably do some more of those in the future. It just is such good distillate. They do such a good job with it. Definitely encourage you to go check out the Woodford Distillery. All family owned. Even everybody sweeping the floor. I mean, it's really cool.
Or you could just come to a bourbon tasting at Water Tower Grill, and you'll get like a taste of the world.
And I just realized you asked what I was drinking, and I told you Jefferson's Ocean. I never explained. So those other rick houses are all stationary. Well, Jefferson's Ocean, what they have done is they said, we're going to put this on a boat, particularly a barge, and we're going to send it to different areas of the world. So they have different batches, and now their philosophy...
Fabricating a climate, not fabricating.
Yeah, no. So the climate is in effect. So if you go to the tropic, you're going to get a lot more movement during the summer than the winter. But if you go to the Arctic, you're going to get a lot less. You're not going to get any real expansion. So you're going to lose a lot. So they found that they get different flavor profiles from the different climates and regions. They get different flavor profiles from the
What a neat idea. Somebody really smart.
Yes, also from the salt that's in the air, the different, the different. I'm trying to think of the word, but the different, the salt water in the air, the different
Well, if you go to
amounts
the
of it.
beach and you go versus going up in the mountains out west or something, I mean, the air feels different. It's a different density.
Yes, humidity and the
yeah,
concentration of salt in the water.
yeah.
That's what I was looking for. That and also the main part is with your rick house, your barrel's sitting there. With the boat, it's sloshing around and moving, and you're getting a lot more char. So I find that these tend to age quicker, so they get
Do
there.
you get like an aged effect faster when
Yes, you do, and you don't want to leave these out there for 15 or 20 years because then they'll be over oaked. It'll be too much.
Oh, okay. So isn't there going to be some evaporation?
2% per
you're going to
year.
lose. Okay,
It's 2% per year. It's called the Angel's Cut or the Angel's Share.
Okay.
That's why Angel's Envy is called Angel's Envy, because what didn't evaporate is left for us.
They didn't get.
Angel's envious of that. So yeah, that's the reason. If you see a 20-year bourbon, you lost 40% of your barrel just to get that product. So not only did you have to wait 20 years to see if you did it right, you lost almost half your product in waiting, and it took you 20 years. So you have to factor in the loss of product, the amount of years you waited, and the risk of, hey, is this even going to be any good?
Do they okay, so does that mean that the more something is aged, the higher proof it is, or do they dilute it back down sometimes?
Sometimes they do. If you get, say, all right, this is Weller 12 year, it's diluted back to 45%. But when this is aged 12 years, it's going to be more than 45%. They wanted to dilute it down to that. That's why this is your only uncut, unfiltered, undiluted product. So yeah, more often than not, they'll dilute it. Now, I will say there are barrel programs that don't, but those are going to be even more because you're getting very low yield.
Okay.
Because you're not diluting it to stretch the product out.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we keep going back, referring to these Wellers. This is the collection that MJ picked to put up here on the mantle behind us for a reason. Tell me about the differences in those bottles and why, like, one is pretty common and fairly inexpensive, right? 30, $40 a bottle versus...
It's the one that you can't see. It's invisible because it doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding. So this is your Weller Special Reserve. It is a green label. It's always 45% 90 proof. This is the one you can find just about everywhere. Now, you should be able to find this from anywhere from $30, $50. I've seen it as high as $100, and I've seen people be happy to pay for it. So if you are happy to pay $100 for this, don't let anybody tell you any different.
Something is worth exactly what somebody's willing to pay for.
Yep. So this has no age statement, and it is 45% alcohol. It's called Special Reserve. When something is age stated, that just means it has the amount of years on it, like this Weller 12 year here. Now, the reason that is significant is that the product in that is 12 years old. What makes that tough is you got to wait 12 years. So if you got a rick house that's 10 years, you can wait 2 more years, and then hopefully it's good. If it hasn't matured by then, you got a 12-year product that's not ready to go.
Okay.
And that is the beauty of this whole collection. So then let's say they get to, let's go up one at a time. So you've got the green Special Reserve, 45%, no age statement. Then we're going to move over here to Weller Antique. Still no age statement, but they put the word antique on it, so you assume that it's old.
It's old, clearly.
And that way it could be anywhere from 6 to 14 years. They're not going to use 14 or 12 or the year in it, but it could be anywhere in that perimeter, and it would still be old.
Does that give them the flexibility then to work with the supply that they have for the current demand?
Because if it was an antique 8-year, they couldn't sell it at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, or at 9, 10, 11.
It'd have to only be 8.
So this way they get to utilize that product. This one, no age statement. So the only difference in the antique and in the Special Reserve is the proof. You got 90 proof, you got 107 proof, or 53.5%. The more proof something has, the more ability it has to shine and have flavors in it. And if you know how to unlock your flavors, I say flavors, but flavor notes, then you really get to pick some special things out. So moving on to the 12-year here, there's no difference in this 12-year and this Special Reserve. They're both 45%. but this one has a 12-year age statement, and this has nothing. So same exact thing here, but 12 years, whatever, anything underneath. Then moving along to your foolproof right here. So a lot of people get confused on that, and foolproof and barrel proof are not the same thing. So
for clarity, foolproof, F-U-L-L.
Yes.
So we're not saying foolproof.
Yeah. Full.
Okay.
Foolproof.
There we go.
And so the reason this is called foolproof, when this is put into the barrel, they're barreling it at 57% alcohol. And so it's going to grow up to, this one is at 64.8% alcohol. So, I mean, you got, a decent amount of change there. What happens is, no matter what it grows to in strength, they dilute it back down to the full proof that it went into the barrel. So this, every time it's 57%.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So this is going in at 57%, but they're diluting it to 45.
Okay.
That's why you have a ton of product.
So this is why it goes back. They dilute it back to the same that it went in as.
Yes, ma'am. And so we have 2 more to go. We have the single barrel. We talked about single barrel products earlier. These really vary. I've had several of these, and I can tell you they go from really good to really bad. Or somewhere in the middle, but this one's a great one. But remember, if you're ordering a single barrel product, or if you're looking for a single barrel product,
it's going to vary.
It's going to vary. So unless you know where this came from, this has no indication of its rick house. It's rick, it's warehouse, it's level in the rick house. Whereas a bourbon like Blanton's will tell you it's always warehouse age.
Okay.
But it'll tell you the rick that it came off of, the row, and the barrel number. And I will say, you could go in a liquor store and they could have 12 of these lined up that were Blanton's. No 2 are going to be the same barrel. It's going to be really hard, but some people choose to go and look for their unicorns.
I was going to say, would a discerning buyer then, like you said, looking for their unicorn, they know what rick, what bear, they would know what they were looking for.
And if someone knows that they want that, they'll probably charge them for it.
But they're probably willing to pay it because that's their unicorn.
Want that one. Yeah. And you only get a max of 200 bottles, maybe a little more. And the reason that I say 200 bottles is per barrel is the Angel's cut and the amount of years. Most people aren't aging them less than 400 or 400, but less than 4 years.
Aged.
That's called a baby. If you ever see a baby bourbon, that's going to be about 2-3 years. And in order, another thing is when you see Kentucky straight bourbon, the word straight means it's been aged at least 4 years. So if you just see Kentucky bourbon, you're dealing with a baby bourbon. You see straight bourbon, it's at least 4 years old. So all of your Wellers are Kentucky straight bourbon. Getting into the last 2, this white label is a create your perfect bourbon. So the significance of this is that every 3 years is when they make the selection. But you can go to create your perfect bourbon. You see the CYPB, createyourperfectbourbon.com, and it allows you to vote. It's a popularity vote, and you can choose the amount of years it's aged, the proof that it is diluted to, and where it is selected from in the rick house. So this is kind of like a People's Choice single barrel product.
Okay. So is this typically, of this collection, aside from this last bottle, this would typically be the pricier of?
If I'll tell you what, let me move that bottle over, and now you have them in price from lowest to highest, and anywhere from 40 to 30 to 50. And these are very subjective prices. You're going to go in some places, and this is going to be $100. You're going to go some places, this is going to be $250, whereas this should be about $50 to $100.
Yeah.
Same here.
Around here, though.
Yes. Around here, you're going to see $250 to $300, $3 to $4, $4 to $6, $6 to $8, and then I just saw that bottle for $2,000.
Wow.
The William LaRue Weller. Now, granted, there is a lot less of these guys floating around than there are of all the others. For me to get this bottle, I'm on a pre-selected list, and I don't get to do anything about it. There was one year there was only 43 bottles of this in the state.
Does it say there on the bottom of it?
So it's telling you it's barrel proof.
Okay.
Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, and then it's got your proof. And
so it almost looks handwritten on there.
Yes, ma'am. There was a time.
It's a font that looks handwritten.
But now it is, and I believe that this is his signature. Saw that. But there was a time when they were handwritten, but now with this taking off so much, I mean, in the late 80s, early 90s, you were getting handwritten products. You were getting just amazing things. And now they have made this such a process of mass production. Don't get me wrong, there are still hand bottled and there are still quality procedures. But when you get into the 80s and 90s bourbon, it's just different. The corn, think about the pesticides and the fertilizers and the things used now versus that weren't then. The wood, same thing, pesticides, fertilizers, the rate that they grow the trees. And I wish I had a block of wood here to show you, but you can turn, say you have a 2x4. If you had a 2x4 from the 80s and you turn it up and looked at it versus one from now, the wood rings on the one from the 80s is going to be so tight. And the wood rings now, it's growing so fast, there's a lot of space in between them. Whereas you may have 40 rings in a 2x4 from the 80s, you're going to have 10 in one now.
See, and I didn't know that, because I would have thought that was just like the difference in the types of wood, pulpwood versus hardwood or whatever.
You're correct. But even within those
I didn't realize there's a difference in like the decades.
They're growing it so fast.
Wow.
And so that affected that movement in and out of the wood.
Of course.
Tighter wood rings will age different than.
Sure, yeah, because it's denser.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a denser wood.
And so so that's your Weller selection up there.
Makes a lot of sense. So Joe has he doesn't have this bottle. He's got this collection. And I don't know if I should tell a funny story as to this bottle, but he was missing the white label bottle from the collection, and I was able to get one from a friend and surprise him with it. And we were in the middle of remodeling our bar, so we had taken all of the bottles out of the bar, and they were being stored in another cabinet for ink. And he was actually like installing some new lights and everything in the shelving.
I love the video. I got it saved on my phone.
So I took all of the Weller bottles out of the storage and put them back on the cabinet at the back, but the white bottle like front and center. And he goes in there, makes a drink, and the bottle is like right here, here. And he goes and he makes a drink. He lays his iPad down. He's watching a video. He's like, it's right here. And he's been so excited trying to find this bottle. And I'm recording the whole time. And he walks out of the room, and I was like, So he gets back and goes in there again a minute later. And I'm okay, here he goes. And I'm recording. He does the same thing, and he goes back and sits down. And so I was like, those lights sure are looking good in there, aren't they? He's like, yeah, they're looking good. And I sigh. And finally I was like, those lights sure are looking good in there, aren't they?
He looks.
He's like, what? And he goes around.
Then I'll see you. He whirls around.
He might have said a bad word, but he's like, oh my God.
There was one bad word. I wasn't going to say it.
It's okay. It's after hours. You can't. I lack the ability to cuss unless I'm mad. I don't know. It's a thing. It just is.
Try a few out on here?
Sure. Go right ahead. What did he say?
I'm just kidding. Holy shit.
We have an audience.
Please click here for the unedited version of this.
We'll have to do it as an outtake. We'll get the editing crew to put it in as an outtake at the end. Gotta stay tuned to the end to see it. So bourbon tastings here at Water Tower Grill. You're taking them to the next level versus your old location. First of all, how long have you been in this location?
We're working on just over 4 months here.
Y'all have done a fantastic job. This is a historic house.
My wife's counting over here. I just saw her.
So I don't know the story behind this location. I mean, I know it's a cool location, and we've been to it before and for other events when it was owned by something else. But what's the story of this house? Do you know?
So this house was originally called the Adairsville Inn. It opened in 1990. And
the house is a lot older than that.
The house, yes, the house is actually 3 houses that were put together.
Really?
Don't quote me on the years, but they started with one part, and you can see where the roof lines come together up on the roof. It's really cool.
But it's the typical old house with the character and the solid wood floors. 1800s?
Yes, late 1800s. It was built by the Veaches. The Veaches were prominent people in the community of Adairsville. A lot of cool stories about them. For those, you're going to have to come to the location, and I will gladly tell you all about the Veaches. But then in 1990, it was renovated and opened as a restaurant, the Adairsville Inn.
Yeah.
It changed hands a few times, a few different owners, a few different concepts, but it kept the name. It was actually open right when we opened the water tower at our old location. And so there was a little bit of overlay where we were both open. And I remember I remember coming over to this location, and Miss Janice was here, and she owned and operated it at that time. She needed some help with some things, and I did my best to help her. But I remember looking around and thinking, man, what a nightmare this would be to renovate. And now here we are.
Fun. Joe and I came here when we were dating because
Really?
he worked at Parkway Ford down the street, which is not there anymore. But they had a couple of their banquets here.
Okay. Yeah.
And I came with him as his plus one.
It was the place to be for Christmas parties and like banquets, and people would come and eat. And
Yep.
Yeah, it was originally called the Adairsville Inn, and we're blessed to have breathed some life back into it, and we've completely renovated it. We tried to keep the things that gave it its original character here, but we have changed a lot as well.
You sure have, and it looks fantastic. You kept so much character, and I love it. Talk a little bit about the renovation. I know that you've probably got a million stories, but the only reason I want to even talk about this is because people see business owners and entrepreneurs and it's like must be nice. They just don't see the hard work that goes into having something like this. And I have kind of followed for the last several months. I mean, this is not easy. I mean, you guys are here after hours with your kids and you got the boys back, moving stuff.
Yeah. It's a lot. And I mean, there were times when we had the water tower open in its old location and it was functioning, and I was over here working. I mean, we took the kitchen all the way to the dirt floor. I mean, I have the picture of us standing on the ground in the kitchen and seeing pictures from when we first started to now. It's shocking to me because I don't know if I've just blocked that out or if it was just we've done so much that I've forgotten all that we've done. But yeah, we've done a ton, and there is so much that has been done, and people come in and they talk about it, and it's like I have to stop and remember, like, yeah, we did that. That's right.
Yeah, well, you got a lot to be proud of. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Can we talk about the next bourbon tasting? Is there anything you're willing to share?
About
what to expect, and because it's very limited seating. First of all, let me say that because if you don't get in,
yes, ma'am,
and you got your regulars that come every time, so there's not always a whole lot of extra seats.
It gets tough. We have 25 seats for the tasting, and I have about 220 people on my guest list.
Yeah.
So I send out the message. I don't really advertise it. It's became kind of a private group, and it fills up pretty quickly. I would love to introduce some newcomers. If you want to come and join the bourbon tasting group, you have to come in. You have to leave your name and number with us when you dine, and then we'll put you on the list. A few things that we do. I'll give you all I can tell you for the next one. Is December the 15th. We either do them on a Sunday or a Monday because they're private events. We provide black linen tablecloths, water droppers with Kentucky limestone water.
I want to get back to that too.
Yes.
But no, finish. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. The upcoming one is going to be titled Weller versus Pappy. And I will leave you to deduce what you want from that. And I will tell you normally we do a appetizer, a soup or salad, an entree with sides, and a dessert. And so all I'm going to tell you is the entree, the main course is a Japanese A5 imported Wagyu filet, hand cut here. It'll be flown in the day before. We'll cut them here. It is it's just simply the best cut of beef in the world. It is amazing. We'll give you a spoon to cut it with.
Yeah, it'll just literally melt in your mouth. It's like butter.
It will. Yes, ma'am.
So a couple of things I want to say there, that you have a great menu here at Water Tower anyway. You've got great bar food and several nice entrees, but it's a nice, well-rounded menu for a local restaurant. So it's very appropriate for the location and what we have. But on the bourbon tastings, you do a special menu that you really take pride in. You kind of go all out with.
Yes, we try to elevate. I mean, we've done caviar and octopus and smoked salmon flowers and bronzino, and I mean,
it's always just fantastic.
Tenderloin filet,
yes,
all kinds of stuff.
Fantastic. So I did have the Wagyu at one of the bourbon tastings. Yes. It's the one and only time I've had A5 Wagyu. And I had been told that it's like butter, and that was not incorrect. That was absolutely amazing. So.
I liken it to a fudge because you think you just want to eat your weight in fudge, but you get about 5-6 ounces in, and it's so rich.
You can't anymore.
You just can't. Same.
Yeah, that is exactly. That's a good analogy. So one more thing, you mentioned the Kentucky limestone water, because I think that's a really important point when you're talking about the bourbon. Why is that on the table?
So couple of reasons. One, we mentioned that they dilute all of their bourbon, and not just Weller, but all bourbon is in Kentucky is diluted with limestone water. The significance there. Let me skip to one thing. Bourbon County, Kentucky, which was I was telling you earlier in the podcast, used to be the only place that you could make bourbon. Anything outside of Bourbon County, Kentucky was considered whiskey. Well, they accidentally founded Bourbon County, Kentucky on the largest limestone deposit in America. So the significance of that is the limestone water. Well, each creek or river, stream that runs over this limestone naturally removes iron deposits from your water. Now, even if you're going to the store and getting some high-end water, some Fiji's, or don't quote me on the brands because some do have iron removed, but most of your water has iron in it, especially if you are getting it from the sink. It's going to have iron in it. Now, the significance there is if you have a distillate that has been aged, any of these, let's say you had the William LaRue Weller, it's barrel proof, it's ready to be diluted down to the special reserve. Well, when you incorporate water that has iron in it, and this is on a molecular level, and I know this is geeky, but you got your char particles floating around in your distillate. Well, whenever iron is introduced to those, it bonds with them and it coats them. And so then a lot of your flavors that you may pick up, caramel, charcoal, tobacco, clove, spice, coriander, vanilla, all the way from the sweet to the bitter, all the whole spectrum, you're not going to get nearly any of that. You're just going to get an alcohol taste, an alcohol smell. Alcohol bloom in particular is when you have alcohol and you close your mouth, you stick your nose in there. And what happens is you trap all those vapors and you burn your smelling receptors. Smelling is directly correlated with your taste. And so you can't taste everything as well, whether it's your bourbon or your food. But the limestone water, touching back on that, you have your flavor particles, your charcoal particles floating around the distillate. When the water with limestone water with no iron is incorporated, when it hits those, rather than bond with it, it makes them explode, and so you get an exaggeration of flavors.
Okay.
And so
that's also why you tell that burn you're talking about is also why when we're at the bourbon tasting and you say, to smell it first, but do that with your mouth open.
Open your mouth, and people tend to think that I'm trying to make them look silly, but if you're smelling it, and there's nothing in here, so I'm not getting alcohol bloom. If you're smelling it with your mouth closed, all the alcohol vapors are trapped in here. If you're smelling it with your mouth open, all the alcohol vapors are going out your mouth, and you're getting nothing but the aromatics. And that's why I'd say you should always open your mouth when you are nosing your bourbon.
Okay, nosing your bourbon. But now, one thing, and I just one more last quick point on the limestone water, because what we noticed with the room full of people, everybody has a particular, their palate changes with one drop, with either no limestone water or with one drop or with 12 drops or a 1-to-1 ratio or whatever. And there's no right or wrong way, right? Like there's one is not better than the other.
Absolutely no wrong way to drink your bourbon. The famous Pappy Van Winkle, Julian Van Winkle the first, said, or he didn't say, but he famously drank his bourbon 1-to-1. So if he had 1 ounce of bourbon, he had 1 ounce of water, no matter what he was drinking. Some people prefer no water. Some people prefer a big rock, and it kind of melts, it cools it down, and it makes it easier to drink as you go. Some people prefer lots of rocks in there, and it makes it just water it down immediately. Some people prefer Coca-Cola in there, and I do have a gentleman that prefers his Pappy Van Winkle with Dr. Pepper. And here's looking at you, but that's okay. It's all right. If that's how you like it,
with no judgment whatsoever.
No wrong way. No wrong way to drink your bourbon. So if that's, enjoy it like you want to. And that's what I really try to push on people. And speaking to what you were saying is, 1 drop versus 2 versus 6 versus 12. Our palates are so different that 1 drop for me is going to taste completely different than it does to you. And that's what I love about bourbon is everybody has their own way to drink it. And there's, like you said, there's no wrong way to do it. So the best thing to do is to get together and talk about it and discuss it and drink it. And the more you drink, the more you probably want to discuss
it. That's true. And I will say as a not a bourbon lover, it's just not my favorite flavor. But I could tell a huge difference between straight versus a couple of drops versus several drops.
Yes.
And so you don't really have to have a discerning palate to pick up on those. It's not subtle. I don't want to call it subtleties. I mean, I felt like there was a big difference.
I've never had, in my experience of, and I can't even count how many tastings we've done, I've never had anybody say that it didn't make a huge difference on the water dropper. Everybody always, when it's their first experience, I always get the, like, I'm like, yeah, there you go. And so I love seeing people develop their palate and learn to drink and learn to taste. And that's one great thing about our tastings is that you have stockbrokers next to mechanics, next to lawyers, next
mattress
to
people,
next to
mattress weirdos.
We all rub elbows and shoulders and get along, and it's great.
It is a very diverse group of people. I do love it too.
Yes,
common interest bringing together. MJ, what a pleasure. Thank you again. It's after hours here. I know that you guys are shutting down the restaurant here in the other room, but I can't thank you enough for stepping in here and leaving the kitchen to
thank you for having me
to give us a few minutes, and can't wait to get this edited, get it posted. You guys like and subscribe to the show, the Nothing Else Mattress Show. As you know, you never know what we're going to talk about on here. We're always going to be talking with somebody who's done some really cool stuff in their business life. And thanks again for the opportunity. And I can't wait to see you December 15th at the next bourbon tasting.
I'm looking forward to having you guys there. And I hope you guys are eating your to-go water tower filet while you're sitting on your big mattress outlet.
I saw those to-go orders go here a little while ago.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hey, no problem. Thanks again.
Yes, ma'am.
When we started out, it was just about providing for our families while being in the driver's seat of our careers. I started in the mattress industry in 1999, and when I left the corporate world and Joe and I opened the Big Mattress Outlet in 2012, we could never have dreamed how rewarding business ownership would be for us.
My only regret is that we didn't do this sooner. I was terrified to make that jump, to leave the comfort of the corporate environment. As the old saying goes, I can promise you, the parachute's never going to open if you first don't jump.
We've built a proven business model that's unique in the industry. It's profitable year after year, even through fluctuating markets and economies. We want to work with like-minded entrepreneurs who, like us, don't mind a little hard work, but want to own something that goes beyond just providing for our families financially. It offers exponential growth and profit opportunity, not to mention just a great culture and a really fun industry.
If you think you might be a fit, we'd love to talk to you.
Holy shit! How did you do that?
How did you stand there with your face in front of it for 7 minutes and not notice?